The systemic corruption, I think, is part of the thing that's so infuriating. Like, obviously, pedophilia, infuriating. Right. We're all on board with this. This is disgusting, and we should, wipe these people from the face of the earth. But what you spoke about earlier, which is this idea that these people have achieved this massive success, and we're left to think, oh, I guess they're just smarter than us. They just know things that we don't know. And it's like, yeah, they do. They know insider trading, and they're all, scratching each other's backs. And when they do get caught for something, they're, reach out to a guy like Epstein, or you reach out to a guy like Lord Mandelson, and you make sure that gets wiped from the record.
Let's give a good example of that. Like in intelligence, Griffin, can you put up the tweet of mine, help with the Russian girl blackmail? So this is a great example of how the power network works. This is going to link together women, blackmail, and foreign intelligence connections. So back in 2015, here's Epstein, and he sends this email to a Russian associate. How are you? I need a favor. There is a Russian girl from Moscow. She's attempting to blackmail a group of powerful businessmen in New York. It is bad for business for everyone involved. She arrived New York Saturday last week, staying at the Four Seasons on 57th Street. Suggestions? Question mark? Right. So so he's like, she's blackmailing my friend, who's a powerful businessman.
Here's her address.
Staying. Here's her address.
What should
this
we
is
do
very
about
bad
it?
for business. What do we do about it? Now, who is the person he emailed? Let's go to the one underneath that, Griffin, the Russian connection. The person he was emailing was a billionaire tied. He was the billionaire tied with an FSB Academy graduate. The FSB is basically like the Secret Service of Russia. He is a Putin-linked oligarch. And in fact, they discover his name is Sergei Belyakov, who is the Deputy Minister of Economic Development and later the head of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum Foundation, which runs the International Economic Forum Foundation in Russia. Now, how do things work in Russia? Intelligence, oligarchy, it's all connected, right? And so you need somebody to go away. Rich guys in Russia, they're also part of the former intelligence service. It's never technically something that's part of ex-FSB. So here's an explicit example that we have here. An intelligence connection, a business associate, blackmail on behalf of powerful businessmen. We're all working together.
Did anything happen to that girl?
Huh? No, actually, we haven't been able to find out whether anything happened
she got hit
to that
with
girl.
one of those
There's some speculation that this was a woman who was involving Leon Black, who eventually did pay tens of millions of dollars in hush money in a separate suit where he was accused of some sexual stuff. Like, again, he denies it, he litigates and vigorously defends himself. But I don't know exactly who this woman was.
Can you bring that back up for a second, Griffin? Because in the email it says New York businessmen or businessmen in New York.
Yeah.
So these would be American businessmen that are being compromised by a foreign asset.
Correct.
Potentially. And now it has come to Jeffrey Epstein's attention by, I imagine, these businessmen or somebody else. And they need to remove the compromising person or the compromising
needs to go away.
So Epstein becomes not only this person who fixes tax problems or rather money laundering, but he also can potentially make people go away. What I'm trying to understand, like we were talking about those a little bit before, is like, where does this leverage come from?
Yeah, right.
So how does somebody get into a position of power where not only do the business class of the or the business elites of the Epstein class go to him, but you actually have connectivity with the government as well?
Yeah. So let's go to the origin story, if we will. So origin story I have in my document. We're going to start with the Mossad email, Griffin, if we can. This just gets to, again, this kind of ties everything together. So in the origin story question, or actually, sorry, origin story, let's do false passport, because that actually even predates that. Okay, so let's start with the false passport. So the last time I was on here, I talked about false passports. Now we actually have a picture of that passport. So let's take a look at that passport. Go to the next one just to show everybody. Here's a very, very young Jeffrey Epstein in a false Austrian passport. Now, what does somebody want to tell me about false Austrian passports back in the 1980s, back when Jeffrey Epstein's only 29 years old? This is during the 1980s. Austria, if you guys have never been, I highly recommend it. And my tour guide, even when I was there, was telling me Austria was the nexus of spies because Austria was a neutral country after World War II. And it's where the US and the Soviet Union had some of the highest concentration of spies of anywhere in the world. And so here we have, right at the height of the Cold War, a false Austrian passport, which has now been released as part of the Epstein files. This is long before he's very rich. This is, like I said, he's only 29 years old. So already in the very beginning, we see indications of this intelligence activity. Now, why and how do you procure a false Austrian passport? You don't get a false passport. That's a comment I made before.
You don't.
There's no such thing as a false passport. There's a passport under false pretenses issued to you by a spy agency. Okay.
So which agency would issue such
exactly.
a...
That's a very interesting question.
Such a passport.
Let's for intelligence. Let's go to the FOIA CIA in 1999 document. This is a very interesting document that was flogged.
Can you explain what a FOIA is?
FOIA is a Freedom of Information Act request. Any of us actually, can just FOIA any agency. There are a lot of rules around what can be FOIA'd and what not, but you can pay your own fees and you can say, I want this under the Freedom of Information Act about something. As long as there's a rigorous review process, etc. You need a pretty good lawyer if you're going to get something which is actually scandalous, and you'll have to fight it for a decade in court. But technically, it is available to you.
You have access to information that has been procured by the government.
The government has. There are certain exceptions. Congress can't be FOIA'd. White House can't be FOIA'd. But executive agencies can. And so you could FOIA somebody's emails. Like I could FOIA my name in the Department of Treasury if I wanted to.
So you can see if they're looking into you. And the idea
or like,
behind
hey,
this
did you see what Sagar said on this podcast? Right? I could see. That's interesting. For a journalist, we actually get free FOIA sometimes, depending on the exemption. But this is a 1999 FOIA that Epstein sent anonymously via his attorney to obtain, quote, all CIA records that might reflect an open or otherwise acknowledged agency affiliation between himself and the CIA. He did it again in 2011 to see if the CIA would acknowledge any links with him 12 years since. 1999 is a very important year. 1999 is at the height of what we call the unipolar moment. This is after the fall of the Soviet Union. And it's when a lot of the Cold War shenanigans were beginning to wind down. After 92, when everything really went away and Russia became democratic, the Cold Warriors, people like Epstein, Adnan Khashoggi, Iran-Contra, the money launderers, they kind of fell out of service because we don't need them anymore. But this gets to I'm pointing and painting a picture of we have a guy with a false passport in the 1980s. We have a guy in the 1999 saying, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you acknowledging your links with me? Last time I was on here, I described how there's a previous story from Rolling Stone. Again, everything I'm saying, I want to be able to make sure people can go and they can check my work. You can go to, Spy Origins, I think. And what we're looking at in this is a Epstein story that was written by Vicky Ward, the OG journalist who wrote about Jeffrey Epstein. She talks about how Epstein was alleged to have been on a private plane to the Pentagon in the 1980s. And he's involved deeply with Adnan Khashoggi, Douglas Leese, other arms traffickers who are at the heart of Iran-Contra. And now people might ask why. And this is where the initial leverage thing comes in. Epstein gets fired for Bear Stearns for financial crimes in the or for lying about effectively money laundering in the 1980s. He becomes an expert, in my opinion, at money laundering and moving money across the globe. Why does the CIA need that? So I explained this to you a little bit, Andrew. One of the things that happened after the Church Committee is that previously...
briefly explain the Church Committee? Because I think it's important to understand how that changes
the Church Committee was a congressional investigation into all the shenanigans of the CIA in the 1970s. And so it exposed MK Ultra, COINTELPRO, all of these crazy things that were happening on U.S. soil. The coup in Iran, right? Like all of the sanctioned, blowing up Castro's cigar, trying to get, his beard, all the insane shit that they used to do, the CIA.
In other words, America is doing some nefarious things around the world and within the country. Right. And I guess the United States citizens, or at least our government representatives, put forth this idea that we should be able to have transparency with that and understand what's going on. So it is a good thing.
Right.
How can we hold people accountable if we don't know what they're doing? This gets passed, and now we're able to hold them accountable. And I'm sure when the CIA saw that, they're like, well, let's just stop doing all this bad stuff.
Of course. They would never keep doing that. Right? What actually ends up is worse. This is what gives rise to the arms traffickers. Because now the CIA can no longer do it under official auspices. Now they have to hire Jeffrey Epstein's, Adnan Khashoggi's. They need cutouts. They need bagmen, the black
so it can't go back to them.
They need that black operators, right? And because what they do is they use them as cutouts to continue doing the same stuff. This is how Iran-Contra happens. Iran-Contra, if it was 1960, they would have just kept doing it, right? But now in 1980, they're like, well, it's explicitly against the law. We need to hire a guy. We need to move money here. We sell it here, sell drugs, and move arms to the Sandinistas and all this other nonsense. And that's why it's such a scandal. But that's why you need an Epstein in the 1980s, because if this is after the Church Committee period, you need these cutout, dirty characters. And these dirty characters give rise to, the Taken line, a very specific set of skills, which is moving money surreptitiously across the globe.